A quick thank you again to our sponsor for this WebEx platform. On Semiconductor has a very strong program for diversity and inclusion. And I want to thank them for generously providing this platform. And I want to remind everyone again to please use the mute feature on your device so we can have really good, clear audio. We are recording this presentation so that it can be available to those who cannot attend today. So having good quality audio is always a plus. So do mute yourself. We do want to encourage questions and engagements though. So there is a chat feature. So you can chat Unju, who you'll see is on the call as well. You can either message her directly or you can do a chat to everyone. We're going to keep an eye on that chat feature, and we'll be doing Q&A at the end of everything. So do be sure to put your questions in there. If it's something that we think is really very pertinent and should be addressed right away, we're going to try to make sure we get to that. But we also want to make sure we get through this presentation and be cognizant of time. We're likely going to end closer to 7:30 than 8. But we want to make sure that we give this presentation the time that it needs. It really has some great information. So Cybersecurity Council of Arizona, we started very informally in 2016, and we've done study groups, we've done events like this. We had a big fun launch party at Choice Hotels. We've helped facilitate the DevSecOps Days Phoenix, the inaugural event last year, and we're doing another one in October, for Cybersecurity Month. We're working on some more dedicated direct study groups as well, and putting together some additional programming. And to address the agenda that was a part of the initial, when you registered, the things you saw we were going to talk about, and our announcements, we're going to talk about a new program in Arizona that's been very successful in the Pacific Northwest, and that's Apprenti. We'll hear from Kathleen for a minute or two on what that program looks like and how you can get involved. We've also been running a survey to hear from people like you, and I'll share some preliminary results from that and invite you to contribute, and a little update on being the first to know, and then we'll get into our presentation from Sam and the Q&A. A reminder to mute yourself. And we've got some new people just joining us now, but if everyone can make sure that their device is muted, that would be great. And Kathleen, are you able to unmute yourself to give a little talk about Apprenti?
Apparently I can, if you can hear me, Rachel.
Fantastic.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks. I appreciate being able to take a couple of minutes to tell you about a wonderful program in high-tech apprenticeship called Apprenti. It was actually started by the Washington Tech Industry Association up in Seattle. Some of you here in Arizona might be familiar with the statewide organization called the Arizona Technology Council, and the Washington Tech Industry Association is kind of a sister organization. The Washington Tech Industry Association 4 years ago received a Department of Labor grant to help increase the use of a tried and true method of apprenticeship and bring it to the high-tech area of IT and cybersecurity. And the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation, under the direction of Jennifer Meller, who is their Vice President of Innovation, began partnering with Apprenti actually almost 3 years ago here in Arizona. This morning, and I'd be happy to send this out afterwards, this morning we actually did a formal launch of Apprenti, which is a registered apprenticeship program. It includes upfront technical training as well as a 1-year, 2,000-hour registered apprenticeship. And we launched it this morning after getting about 80% of the way through a pilot with Salt River Project. They call the program Coals to Computers, because in fact, when the Navajo generating station up on the Navajo Nation was closing, they decided to use this apprenticeship model as part of their redeployment strategy. And in fact, 9 individuals who were everything from crane operators to coal power generation techs are in the process now of becoming IT business analysts. This program has an upfront assessment that companies help to build that includes critical thinking, problem solving, logical thinking types of things, math up through algebra 1 and a little bit of geometry, so not calculus, and social emotional workplace skills that determine someone's aptitude. So even if they haven't had a technical background or even haven't taken math in a long time, by assessing those areas, that determines the aptitude to be successful in rigorous technical content. For cybersecurity analysts, which is our next cohort and that PayPal is leading, or software dev, network specialists, a wide range of careers. In the programs, the training, once you're selected by a company, is actually provided. The cost of the training is provided by the company. And then individuals, once they successfully complete the training, which could be anywhere from 2 to 4 months, go into that registered apprenticeship where they are paid and where there are benefits. So I don't want to take any more time today except to tell you that if you go to apprenticareers.org, you can find out more about the initiative. You can actually take the assessment, which is free. And I'll be happy to put my email in the chat as well if you have any other questions. But I want to get into the presentations that we have tonight. So thank you for letting me share that information, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know it's something that has, I think that's 2 years in the building to get it launched here in Phoenix. And again, for everyone, the assessment is completely free. It's confidential between you and any employer considering you for this apprenticeship program. The training is no charge, and the employment is paid employment as an apprenticeship. And I believe I have all that correct, Kathleen, but that's, that's the big broad strokes, right?
You absolutely do. And I would just say the last piece is there's a focus on women, individuals who are underrepresented in the high-tech field, and veterans and their families as well. So this program seeks to cast a wider net and broaden the opportunities for people that might not otherwise have them.
Fantastic. I did see, thank you. And I did see a quick question about getting a peek at the, it's going the wrong direction. There we go. Another peek at the agenda. It's really basic. We're just talking a couple of opportunities, and then we're going to get into the presentation and do Q&A at the end. Again, if you want to,
this works though.
We can make sure everyone is on mute, please. And then if you have questions,
the presentation and then the speakers on the side. It looks like
Yep, you're correct. The presentation is going to be happening, and then if you have questions, you can do chat on the side. But do be sure that you are muted. Thank you. So we have been running an open survey, open feedback from you, our community. We invite all of you to participate. If it's your first time going to our website, you should get a pop-up that prompts you to go to the survey. If not, you can just go to ccofaz.org/survey. The nice part about taking that survey is it also gets you on our mailing list if you're not already. And it lets you share with us, for example, what time of day is best for you to participate in meetings. And we found that evenings seem to be the best, although there is some consensus of over lunchtime, but that's spread over a couple of hours. And then most people say weekdays are better than weekends. And from a content standpoint, what really stood out is that it seems like our constituents value the opportunity to connect with other professionals. And making those connections, it's a new challenge in our new world. So we're working on creative ideas to accomplish that for you. And then we also feel that skills it has a great advantage as well. Another, let's see if it's right in.
That's good. We just had
Can you whoever's speaking,
had a coffee.
Can you please, let's see, I'm gonna turn off sharing again to review everyone.
I love it. I can't wait to work there.
There we go. Got you muted, Elena. We're going to share screen again. All right, so connecting with other professionals seems to be the big key, so we're working in creative ways to do that virtually for you. I think building mentor partnerships ties into that as well. One of the things we ask of our speakers is that they be available after these talks, so that's something you'll get to see from Sam too. And then we also would like more people to get involved. regardless of your skill level, there is definitely ways that you can contribute. And raising your hand when you take that survey is a great way to do that. You can also message me. You can message any of our board members as well. Unju is managing the chat for your questions. You can let her know there, or you can message the board directly from there. And I think that's what we have for announcements. I'm going to end screen sharing, and I'm going to let Sam stand up and, so to speak, and introduce himself. I will say, I think the first time I met Sam was actually at a CCAZ event, at a meetup for another speaker several years ago, and watched him be an awesome mentor and a brave person. He spoke at DEF CON last year as part of a team, and he's done some really cool stuff in digital forensics as well as the healthcare industry and a few other industries as well. So Sam, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, so to speak. I think I can make you a presenter as well.
Okay. And just my check, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, now that Rachel's put me out that high up on that pedestal. Ah! All right, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the video because we're going to go to the presentation, but I just want to let you know this isn't pre-recorded. All right, here you go. All right, we're going to share my screen. And it's going through. It says it's asking for permission. Survey says. Okay, it's going to give that weird effect. Can you hear me?
Hello.
It's you.
It is.
All righty. Can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Okay, everybody. Very different times we're living in. Obviously, before the great pause of COVID, when you go to these regular conventions, I can usually see your faces. So I'm going to generate and assume that if you have any thoughts or concerns or questions, you'll pass them through the text over. And at the end of this section, we'll actually go through and we'll be able to address them. But without further ado, I'm going to give a brief intro on how to get into and grow in cybersecurity, as well as the Autopsy forensics tool, and just a little bit about myself. As Rachel has said, I'm a person who's been in this industry for over 20 years, and pretty much anybody who's been in the industry that long, we really have a hard time gauging when did we become cybersecurity, because 20 some odd years ago, if they had an IT department, they figured, hey, we have antivirus, we got a firewall, we're good. And obviously, what's occurred is over the 20 years, we've all seen that, wow, there's a big distinction between IT, cybersecurity, and with that, 20 years, they've kind of gone down to all these different jobs. Because I was at the beginning and kind of rode that wave, I got the opportunity to really just have nearly every role. I've done everything from help desk, ID provisioning. I've done obviously heavy incident response, forensics, e-discovery. I've had management director roles. I've been virtual CISO for a large project. And if anybody's dialing in, they've seen my presentation chart like this before. The newest thing I've got is that I'm very excited. In about a month and a half, I'll now be an instructor at Arizona State University teaching cybersecurity. So kind of a new chapter in my life as well. Industry-wise, as Rachel said, I've been heavy-duty healthcare, pharmaceuticals, but I've also been in banking, automotive, retail, and just general consulting. So kind of a wide breadth, and I'm hoping to share an aspect of that for you this evening. And Rachel did bring this up. This is a little different for me, but I was like, hey, different times. Let's take on this challenge. Tonight, we're going to talk about really two separate topics, but they're interrelated. Obviously, the one about like getting in the career, how to move on in your career, and then also about a forensic tool. And my goal is that At the end of this, you're really going to be left with, okay, I'm empowered to make a move forward with several of my colleagues, and especially Rachel just yesterday. I've added so much into the resources section of this presentation. So once this goes out, it'll give you additional places to look for a lot of the things I'm talking about in the presentation, and I'll mention them here or there as we go. And what should happen is about 15, 25 minutes for Agenda 1, 15, 25 minutes for Agenda 2, and that should leave us a nice pool of time at the end. So if there's any questions, we can cover it. So for the first talk, we'll go right into it. As much as we get to kind of go and explore these talks, this one's always been very personal to me, and I was very excited when Rachel and I talked about getting to do this. I myself have been in the situation that probably some of you on this call are in. Either you're knowing in a place that you really want to do cybersecurity, but maybe you have no IT background, no cybersecurity experience, or at another point in my career, I had experience, but I just could not get into cyber, and I was like, why is this? How can I do this? And you're going to see there were some reasons for that in the industry that hopefully things like we just saw for the apprenticeship are going to really help break down those walls and enable all of us to get to do what we're very passionate about. So in that same context, I have people regularly reach out to me on LinkedIn when I talk at conferences, or just people refer other people to me, and they're asking that same question: how do I get in? How do I move forward? I want to get off of the help desk. I want to go do something in cyber. And that same conversation will also go down the path of, you know, if you're looking at just starting a cert or just starting a degree, um, let alone if you don't have experience in it, it can look like, oh my gosh, it's another 4 years before I can do this job. Will the job still be of any value? And I can tell you without a doubt, cybersecurity in general is in the golden age right now. It is that rare moment in time where the industry knows they have got to have you. There's a clear path for you to get to where you want to go, and kind of that missing piece in between the education part, pretty much they're really gotten through to it. They're really going to be able to give you a pathway forward. And to kind of go forward with that whole thought, last year, right about November, um, there was an article that came out, and it really got a lot of attention very quickly, that the global market, by the end of next year, the end of 2021, they're expecting somewhere in the 3.5 million unfulfilled job roles. So that's everything from brand new person coming into the industry, doing some sort of analyst work, all the way up to the very senior executive roles. And I tell you that to let you know that, hey, you know what? You're at the right place at the right time. And there's just going to be so much opportunity going forward that, just hang on and, just move forward. So that will always lead to the conversation of, where do I start? Is it a degree? Is it a certification? Is it experience? And based on my own journey on this, I can tell you that the degrees back 20 years ago were pretty much hardcore cybersecurity, and they were not. They just weren't what they are now. They were so hard in math. And full disclosure, I'm dyslexic, and I am not strong in math. That is not my Jedi Knight skill. And the degree, they've really now come up with, there's several degrees out there. You can specialize, you can generalize, but degrees are great, but you don't have to have a degree. And then certifications, there are, I've got 2 slides, or maybe even 3 slides, that cover the plethora of certifications out there. And some of them are more germane than others, like, they're really highly sought after than others, but they have value. No, pretty much all certifications have value. And then that last part is experience. We don't really get a chance to get into it here, but a lot of times I will find that people have had experiences in cyber that they didn't realize they were having. For instance, if you've written the help desk and you've done the validation of username, password, and reset, well, all of a sudden this person doesn't realize that they're dealing with credentials, they're dealing with two-factor authentication, and sometimes it's just having a conversation with another person in the industry to kind of help tailor your resume to address that. But I digress. So degree, certification, experience, which if you look at that second part, that second question says, what's the most important thing to have to start and grow in cybersecurity? Is it a degree? Is it certifications? Is it experience? And I think pretty much everybody will, at some point, if you boiled it down to, all those are not possible without passion. And passion in cybersecurity goes far beyond like the concern about money. I mean, money's great, and that there are resources. It'll be there for you. But I've seen people who have a degree, a certification, and even multiple years experience in this industry, very, very knowledgeable, very talented, but lack passion. And it's just it's going to limit your experience of this opportunity, and it's just going to make it such that you're just not going to be able to get everything you wanted. But on the flip side, I can tell you I've also gone through as a hiring manager and had people that maybe they didn't have a degree, maybe they had a certification or not, but it wasn't the right one, or the experience or not. But they were so passionate on the interview that I was able to take a step back and be like, you know what? They might not have that, but I can justify that they're willing to learn it because they're going to eat, breathe, sleep this and really be passionate about it and bring that energy level to their day-to-day life. I can work with them on the degree, the certs, experience, etc. So speaking about certs, back in 2000, well, probably before 2000, there's a pendulum that happens, and you watch this cycle over the years. There are times where degrees are like the only thing, and degrees are mandatory. And without a degree, your certs and experience don't count. But coming out of the late 90s into 2000, we had shifted back where suddenly degrees really didn't matter, certifications mattered. And kind of as times went on, that's kind of swung back, and now they really are kind of open. Do you have a degree? Do you have a cert? Do you have experience? If you've got all three, you're pretty much, ready to rock. But if you've got one of the three, they're willing to move forward because there's just so many roles. But back in 1990s, these were the three key groups that were. I mean, there was other ones that were doing specialized vendor tools, like you could get certified on a particular firewall or particular antivirus. But ISACA, ISC squared, CompTIA, GIAC/SANS were really the only games in town that were teaching generalized, back then they would call it security certifications. And they had 1 to 5, and there's only 4 of them. And certifications at that time, there were so few. Some of my colleagues would play like a game of, instead of trying to be like, hey, I need this cert to get this job because I want to do this for my career, it became almost like Pokemon. Like, I got to catch them all. I got to get every cert. And what I'm hoping by the end of this talk is you realize that time has changed, and it's just not possible. And one of the areas that I'm going to just address in a couple slides here is the NICE cybersecurity framework, which we'll get into in a moment. But just imagine that the government's just as concerned trying to solve this gap of cybersecurity talent, and they've said who that they recognize currently as the independent providers of certifications. And barely, what, 15, 20 years ago, went from these four to all these providers. Now, these providers were around even then, but my own experience, the internet wasn't like it is now. There wasn't that you just look around for the keyword and find it. Uh, but all these now organizations now have 1 to 5 certifications, and this is specialized just around general cybersecurity. Even that Cisco cert, that's really a generalized cert. It's not a specific tool cert. And if you were to go down the rabbit hole of like, oh man, I want to get all these certs in all these areas, um, a lot of these start getting very pricey. They start getting the 500,000, 5,000, 7, 8, $10,000 certifications, and but wait, there's more. Remember, I said these were general cybersecurity certs. What about all those applications we know about, right? The antiviruses, the firewalls, all the possible vendors out there that make cybersecurity tools. And if you look, this is only from last year, 2019. This mapping doesn't even have all areas of cybersecurity. It's just got some of the main ones: security incident management, service providers. And if you squint down, or when you get the presentation, you blow this up a little bit, you'll see that some brands are in multiple quadrants. And the double-edged sword for that, of course, is yes, they have multiple products. That means they have multiple certs. So if you were going to go like, I want to know all the things, get certified and everything, it probably would be very impractical. When you start getting into these tools, they can be 100,000, $500,000, $1 million to implement into a very large organization. Then they have to go ahead and get another $7,000, $10,000 certification. So it's just something that tends to be more specialized, but that's not bad if as you get these opportunities to learn tools, techniques, or certifications, when you're going through it, understand that tool may not exist in 2 to 5 years. But the fundamentals you'll learn with that tool, it may be a different way they're getting that information, a different way they're analyzing that information. But if you understand the fundamentals, it won't matter. You can transfer it to any other tool. And also, I bet if we looked up these companies right now, probably there's some that are no longer here, some that got bought, and some that just went defunct. So unfortunately, that's the reality of our rapidly changing cybersecurity tools. So as promised, I did mention that the federal government really started seeing the same problem that may have driven you to this call, where you're like, hey, I can't get into this industry and I want to, or maybe you're a provider going, I get the wrong candidates. What the government did is they sponsored through an organization called NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They said, we want to go ahead and wrap our hands around this problem and provide a way forward, because cybersecurity, whether you're in the US or any other country, you having a risk in your cybersecurity makes it a risk pretty much for the entire populace. It's unfortunately, if your house is left unlocked, it gets broken into, it hurts everybody. So NIST came up with the National Initiative for Cyber Education. Nice. And at a very high level, and I give links into here, and there is just a lot of great information here. They went through, looked at the problem, and said, okay, there's 3 areas. The employer keep asking from their own point of view for a job, and that could be either from their organization or, especially over the past 20 years, it depended where you came from. If somebody was writing a job rec and they came from a heavy duty IT background and now they were a manager, director, VP, whatever, CISO, their job recs tended to be very much like what they knew. Hey, they've got to know everything about these operating systems, patching them, etc. But if the same person, or in that same role, but a different person came up from more of auditing side, where it's not so much as technical, but it's more of dealing with how the business interacts with the technology and securing it that way, you might find a completely different set of skills and requirements. And the problem with this was the organization itself would try to have hierarchical overview of what a title would be. And Rachel and I just talked about this yesterday. The classic, is it a cybersecurity engineer? Is it a cybersecurity analyst? If you start going through job recs and try to base it only on this, and I wish it was solved, it's not. Um, Still to this day, I've seen job recs where the organization lists it as, let's say, a manager. But when you read the job rec, it really sounds more like a vice president. But then I know another colleague of mine who he's an individual contributor doing an aspect of forensics. And because the organization, the industry he's in, because of the level of information he gets access to, he's actually classified as a vice president, even though, no direct reports, etc. So that's all over the map. And then you as the learner were trying to get these jobs or trying to move in these different roles, and you may be the exactly what they asked for, but then when you get that job, it's not what they said it was going to be, because it was not, it was a mismatch. It was what they were asking for wasn't correct, and what you got was what they asked for, but it wasn't correct either. So the government went through and said, okay, we're going to standardize this. We're going to at least try to come up with a middle ground to help the educators in the middle, because colleges for formal education, or any type of trade school or certification, their whole intent is trying to get you skilled up to be in an area of demand. And at that time, the market was changing so much. It was kind of like, hey, I think go here. Hey, I think go there. And you were kind of hitching your hopes and dreams on a certification was going to be of value. So what they did is they normalized that and said, okay, we're going to get the employers, the educators, and the learners all on the same page. And you see those icons up on the top, the red through the purple? They're broken down into categories. I'm going to go to the next slide. They're going to lose the icons, but the words will be the same. So they went ahead and broke down all the jobs and kind of really thought high level, how do we address this issue with as minimal categories as possible? And the publication really goes into and guides you on a path of saying, okay, well, hey, I think I want to do investigations. Like I knew I wanted to do investigations my whole time. It can go ahead and tell you, hey, in the beginning of your career, these are the type of job titles you should be looking for. These are the type of search you should be getting. Then midway through your career, and then as you get senior in your career. But also, they did a real great job of saying, like, maybe you go into something where you're doing analysis and you're trying to build secure systems, like secure provisioning. You do that for a couple of years, and then you're like, gosh, I really I want to do something else. It gives you steps off points where you can kind of like go into a different direction or a different cert. But one area that this does not cover, and I had another colleague of mine, she said, hey, these are great, but if you come from a secure mindset, whatever that means, certification, education, or training, and you're like, none of these really find my passion, or I'm still not sure this is what I want to do, there's three other areas that just are not listed here: sales engineer, project management, and consulting. Sales engineer, on that prior slide with all of those possible tools, when an organization tries to bring those into its company, there's somebody that's got to help know how it works, how to bring it in, and how to make sure it's working efficiently. That's what they do. Project manager, any of these big organizations on these tools, all but maybe the most simple, are very complicated to put into the organization. And a project manager just makes sure things are done on time in a particular way. But someone who's got cybersecurity in their background and does that are very highly sought after because they understand the nuances and the problems. Finally, consulting. I've done it for many years. In the old days, it meant you got to be an absolute expert in this particular area and be highly sought after. Now it's completely flipped. There are still those roles, but nowadays they know this is going nowhere, job wise. Like 3.5 million dollar, 3.5 million jobs. They know that this will be there. So what they're trying to do now is trying to get people onto their organization, start training them up, guiding them, and exposing. All three of these would expose you to a lot of different problems, a lot of different organizations. So please keep those in mind too. If you're going, gosh, I want to get into cyber, but I don't know where, I don't know how, that might be another avenue for you. Last two slides for this presentation, and then we'll move to the forensics. GEEK and CHIC. I wanted for a long time to address this. There's nothing wrong with either one of these, but it's just sometimes you have to know how to speak the two languages, and you become very sought after for this. The Oxford Dictionary says geek is engage in or discuss computer-related tasks obsessively or with great attention to technical detail. I have been guilty of this many a times. I have talked to people and I get all excited about the technology or whatever is going on. And then when I look up at them and they're staring at me blankly or now thinking about what they're going to go shopping for, I realized maybe I've gone too deep. Flip side, chic, stylish, elegance, typical of a specified kind. When I started really thinking about this, neither one is wrong, but what really is occurring here is if you've ever overheard your doctor, your accountant, your lawyer, or let's say it's a sport like golf, for example, if you are not knowledgeable in that area, you might say like, "Hey, my arm hurts." And then your doctor does all of this stuff and he's like, "Oh, his arm hurt here, XYZ, upper, lower, blah." And you're still following along with them. But then when they transcribe it or they tell their assistant, they're talking about they're talking in Latin for the usually, and they're talking about certain bones, tendons, and other things they want you to go do. And in golf, if you don't know about this, maybe on the chic side, you're just saying like, "Hey, there's golf, and they hit a ball, and it goes into these holes, and they yell four." Vice, when you talk to the geek side of that, they're talking about slices and hooks and wind and the way that the green actually goes. And so, what I want you just to kind of be aware of is that the geek side of it is just super technical and can be appropriate, and then chic can be another way where you're starting to speak to the business. And so I gave some examples here, but the top one, definitely, I just want to use it as an example. This actually occurred for me when WannaCry was starting to come out, which was a virus that if you didn't patch your systems with a certain patch, it hit your computer, automatically went ahead and encrypted it, uh, ransomware, and basically charged you bitcoins to possibly decrypt your information. And what was really scary is it just kept replicating it. They're a very specific type of virus. For the IT department, I was like, oh my gosh, this is critical vulnerability, MS 17010. You've got to patch immediately. When I knew I needed to go to senior leadership, because unfortunately it was where I was at the time was in the afternoon into the early evening, and of course on a Friday, and I knew I was going to have to ask for people to cancel whatever plans they had for the weekend because I didn't know how bad it was going to be to patch. It was going to require overtime, and I think it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was not going to be a good story. I sat there and specifically coached myself onto basically saying, here from a business standpoint, what's the problem? We've got to patch immediately, or our systems are going to be encrypted by this virus that's going all around the world. And we will have, at the minimal, reputation loss, definitely loss of revenue because the systems are going to shut down. And we're possibly going to be fined for regulatory violations. Needless to say, when I spoke like that, I was able to get what I needed there too. So I just want you to be mindful of this in your career and just kind of use the tool you need. Final slide for this section, association, groups, and conventions. Prior to the great pause, we always went to, got together, which was invaluable. I can directly tie a lot of my success in my career, both from a technical standpoint as well as career standpoint, to conventions and to networking with people. Right here, we've got Cybersecurity Council of Arizona. Normally, when we don't have what we got going on, we've got Cactus Con, um, and then specific organizations and groups that are tied to maybe you like web penetration testing. There are specialized groups that only go into that area, OWASP, and just as a high level, just to kind of let you know these are out there. I've given you in the links additional resources to the various conferences, and it's this great site that's updated literally hourly for any conference security wise in the world. Some of the icons or some of the names you may not know. I mean, most people know ISACA, ISC Squared, Twitter, etc. ShakaCon is just like CactusCon. It's a specific one in Hawaii where I was for many years. B-sides vary from state to state. Uh, the big daddy of them all, DEF CON, don't really care what someone does in cyber. I always try to push to get my teams there because it will expose them to 20 to 50,000 people that are, really doing this in real life as practitioners or the bad guys. But at the end of the day, they're getting that affiliation. The other part is InfraGard. It requires that you be a U.S. citizen. I highly recommend this for everybody. It's a public-private liaison between the FBI and the private sector, specifically around critical infrastructure. So that could be pretty much any job someone does: healthcare, retail, food, etc. And that's a lot, and I appreciate it. And we're just going to jump right into the next section. But don't worry, I've got all the links and resources at the end of this, so you're not going to be left high and dry. So everyone take a deep breath. And the autopsy forensic tool, talk number 2. So this area, I am hoping, if I had 4 to 8 hours, I would say we're scratching some of the surface of what forensics is and what it's capable of, and let alone this tool. But we just don't have that. We just don't have that time right now. And I'm going to give you directions to other resources, everything else. So when we get to the tool, some of it's going to be more clicking and pointing and directing, but I've given the additional resources in the back to cover things like how a file system's put together, timestamps, all the different uh, the part where if you were just getting into forensics, I think would be very approachable. Network forensics can be approachable. Even steganography and defining what that is and how to detect it and break it is doable, but it just requires a lot of extra steps that we don't have time for here. But what we do have time to go over is what is computer forensics? And this is a definition. I took this one from Wikipedia. What I love about this definition is that everybody's definition is slightly different, but almost all the same. And when someone asks me, they go, "Hey, what is computer forensics?" I just tell them it's the art and science of, if you look kind of that second to third level, identifying, preserving, I say collecting instead of recovering, analyzing, and presenting digital art, information or digital artifacts. Whichever definition you go with is fine. It's all going to basically boil. So in that prior slide, I gave some keywords. And as I was going down the rabbit hole of going to show you this tool, I quickly became aware of, wow, how much underpinning of keywords and concepts are required in this. It's almost like its own career. Who knew? So you don't have to memorize these, but I just want to plant the seed for you here in the, it's my college days. I cite all my stuff with like APA. So at the end of this, it gives the links that you can go back and do more studying wherever interest you might have. So the very first thing that you're going to usually hear from forensics people is ESI, electronically stored information. All that means is it, regardless of the device you're watching this on right now, that'd be a computer, a cell phone, a tablet, to a utility system that's making our energy run, to possibly pumping oil out of the ground. Inside that device somewhere is the zeros and ones. Electronically stored information is those zeros and ones. Identify. Identify is trying is a very important part of forensics, where we try to limit how much work we're going to have to do and what we're trying to look at. And the in a slide or two, you'll see why this quickly gets out of hand if you don't do this. Plus, there's also some legal repercussions. Next one is preserving. This goes into what you sometimes hear on law enforcement. It's called chain of custody. And really what the concept is here is trying to preserve that device in such a way that it's not altered, or at least not altered in a unpredictable manner. That's all I'm going to get into it on at this talk, but that could be a several hour conversation there from training. Recovery, the other definition gave it, so I wanted to keep it in sync, but I call it collection, is purely gathering that ESI. And if you think about all of our electronic devices, what we're trying to do is extract the information off of that device, collect it into some format that we can move to the next step, which is analyze it. Analyzing is actually the real area we're going to talk about with the forensic tool, is just looking at the data for a particular reason, or I like to think of it as to prove or disprove an accusation or a hypothesis. Last one is present, which is absolutely the most important part of all of this. And that part, my teams, they know I am a stickler. I choose with like word format, past tense, present tense, active voice. And if you really think about what you're going to do here, is you're going to look for some forensic artifact to prove or disprove something. if someone said, for instance, that someone did something over there, Bob saw Mary do something, he thought, and so he told HR, and HR said, "Yep, this sounds like we need to do something. Go look through Mary's computer and find out this," and they authorize, and there's a whole process for that. But you go in and you quickly find out it wasn't what he thought; it was something else entirely. That report may be a one pager saying what you did, the scope, and that there was no problem. Okay, great. But suddenly maybe what he saw was accurate and Mary was doing something she shouldn't have been. Well, now all that you've really got in this forensic report is the step-by-step processes you took so that you can prove that they're forensically duplicatable. Someone else could recreate your work, and B, that you've either brought the information in such a way that that HR person can make, say like, hey, yes, based on this information, we're going to move forward with some sort of sanction up to including termination. And with termination, unfortunately, what can also happen is, uh, a litigation. And that whole story of litigation and the time it goes to court can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And you get brought into court 2 to 5 years later with a presentation, you really want to have a very accurate document, and because by that point you'll probably have lots of other cases. It'd be quite a challenge to remember what you said, 3 or 4 years ago. That's all I'm going to say on that, but I just want you to be aware of it. Okay, so where can digital forensic, computer forensics lead you both from learning about techniques as well as what you can do with it? So, as Rachel said, one of my prior roles was around medical device and medical device forensics or Internet of Things. Think in terms of your like your Nest Watch or your um, any type of embedded chip into something. There are processes and techniques from a digital forensic point of view to collect that information, pull it out, turns it into zeros and ones. Same thing with network analysis, cell phones, tablets, uh, even the computer's memory, accessing and getting a hold of it, pulling it down into a forensic way to analyze it. That's just digital forensics. And so sometimes people get hung up on thinking the analysis is the job. You could really use pretty much everything on the left side in one of the right side type of jobs. So maybe if it was a virus, maybe it's malware analysis, but it's to prove incident response. Like, oh my gosh, how do we shut this down? But then it can also be used for digital crimes, or like we just talked about with the prior example with Mary, maybe now it's an internal investigation by HR and eventually leads to litigation, e-discovery. And let's face it, maybe you accidentally deleted your file and you're like, oh my gosh, I need it back. Well, digital forensics can do that too. You can grab that file and bring it right back to life as long as it's not been overwritten. So lots of opportunities to learn things and do certain analysis, and lots of opportunities to move forward with them. And this slide, I'm going to try and cram probably an average forensic class to cover this would probably be a 1 day, maybe a really talented speaker and instructor 6 hours, up to 2 days. So the scenario is we have a universe of information and perhaps too much. If you think about all the possible places that the data could be and how big it is, I mean, just from what we've seen in the past 5 to 10 years, storage has gotten cheaper, and of course, they provide it with you. So that's all relevant information. But the whole goal really of that first step of forensic is, okay, which one of these do I need to get? Is the MRI, is that important? Is that CD-ROM? Is that box of floppy disks they just found? They need to know if they can destroy them or not. There's a process that goes through there where they're going to collect that information and convert the information to zeros and ones. Okay, pretty straightforward. But if you think of all the zeros and ones that are on the device you're observing this through, there are probably tens of thousands of lines of code, all made into discrete programs that make up the operating system, the web browser you're using, the text interface, etc. And in forensics, what is just pretty much mandatory is we have to have a way to distinguish one set of zeros and ones from another set of zeros and ones. And so we do that by, you'll either hear it called fingerprinting the file or hashing the file. And the simplest way I can put it is it's a mathematical function that turns any piece of information, be that a graphic, a video, an executable, a whole hard drive, into an alphanumeric number of a specified length. For example, I just took the word hello world and I turned it to MD5 into a SHA-1. You don't need to memorize these, but just so when you see it later on at an MD5, they're just very fast functions to convert whatever they put in to this same length, but different. So if let's say this was in a text file and it just said hello world and I did MD5 and it was this. I then put one space in the file, saved it again, fingerprinted again, it'd be a different set of numbers. And why this is important is when we start talking about something bad, that could be a file, that could be a picture, that could be whatever, we have to have a defensible way in court to say, hey, this file was on this computer and it was accessed based on the information by that person. And here you go. Someone else can come right behind you, fingerprint everything again. Sure enough, it's the same file. At a high level, that's what it does. The reason they do different types of MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, etc., is if you take the infinite amount of information and compare it against every other piece of information with MD5 and even SHA-1, you will eventually hit some files that are different names, different files, different lengths that have the exact same fingerprint. It's called a collision. The thing with it is, though, in forensics, it really isn't that big of a deal. And these functions are so fast that pretty much the standard you're ever going to see is MD5 SHA-1. As computing power gets faster, I'm sure will change eventually, but for now, that's just what they do. But now, if you think about it, let's say that we had some investigation that involved 25 people, not a large investigation, but definitely a medium investigation. Average investigation is like 1 to 3 computing devices, but let's say it was a medium investigation, 25 people. Each of these people have a company cell phone, a company USB drive, which these days are like a terabyte, and they all have laptops. And each of these laptops has like 5 terabyte hard drives. If you were to go out there and go collect that, you would now have this huge pool of zeros and ones. It could probably be 200 terabytes, 500 terabytes, probably not in the future, it'll probably be like a petabyte, just tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff that you're trying to find. Sometimes, I wouldn't say a needle in a haystack, but you're trying to find like a box of needles in a haystack. And we just went over that function there where you saw the fingerprinting. The government many years ago started saying this was going to probably become an issue. And so they came up with the National Software Reference Library. And pretty much everyone in forensic, we just call it NISRL. And if you think about when you got your brand new computing device, whatever it is, before you installed any applications on it, it was like pristine. And you knew every single file that was on that computer that made it run, that came from the factory or that came from the original file installed. So if you downloaded the browser and ran that, but didn't do any plugins, didn't do anything, you knew every single file in that subset of that program. Well, you knew exactly where it came from, unless it was found to be malicious later. Really, you knew it was exactly those files with that information. So if you think about fingerprinting in that case, and this is what the government's done, is they went through and they fingerprint and they keep it running. Every single Windows, I think from like Windows XP on, it's probably even earlier than that, every single Microsoft version, every single Linux version, Mac, then all the browsers, all the software, like it's just this huge library. If you followed along with the pre-prep work, I think even that specialized NISRL that is put together specifically for autopsy, it's still like 2 gigs of information. But now you know that everything that's in that file doesn't matter. So an investigator will they'll typically do on such a large matter, they'll say, here's my universe information. I'm going to take out all the NISRL. And it could probably be about 25 to 30% of all that data. So if you think 500 terabytes and you just shrunk it down to 300 terabytes, you're going to be pretty happy. And then, as I was sharing with you before, being dyslexic, I had forgotten what the mathematical icon was for subset. That C is not a C. That's the icon for the representation of a subset. So it just means the full circle of data. The initial is a subset of that information. As a forensic examiner, we would ask that during that first part of that phase, the scope, and we'd say, hey, you know, is there a particular type of information you're looking for? Maybe you only care about pictures. Maybe you only care about Word documents. You only care that if they were made in the past 3 months, 6 months, times. And what we'll do is we'll try and take all that information and yank out as much subset as possible. The the more the better. And then what we're left with is only to investigate the leftover zeros and ones, which that could be even more. So that was just a crash course in a key part of forensics that you just slid through and drank for the fire hose. So I acknowledge you for that. Now, why into autopsy? And then we're going to get right to the demo. Um, Autopsy is originally the sleuth kit, and now it's a graphical user interface, and it's been around for many years. It's been around since I was wanting to get in this career, but at the time, the forensic tools hadn't really picked a particular way they were representing it. User interfaces were still being sussed out, and the tool then was probably just as powerful, and it's used even back then by law enforcement, government, military, stuff like that. But the user interface just wasn't what I was doing in my real 9 to 5 job. And so I just could never find a way to do that transfer information. Well, now if you go ahead, download this free software and you get good with it, maybe you take Brian Carrier's intro class and you start doing your examinations, it's a directly relatable skill that you can talk about in an interview. Um, this also going to give you the opportunity, if you go do the scenario, write up your own report. I know if I had someone did all this, wrote the report, and then during the interview said, "Hey, would you mind if right now we have to do them all remote. Can I send it to you?" I would be so impressed and I would be intrigued. Even if you were not the most qualified candidate, I'd have to go take a look and have a conversation because I would be impressed. And I think that's pretty much all of us because it's showing initiative and probably a passion for this career. So disclaimer, this is being recorded. This is reflection on no one, but just a couple things. Don't do bad things with this information. It's like anything else, pen testing, computer security. You can learn to do bad things with this, and you just don't want to do that. Only examine devices and data that you have absolute right to look at. That includes with your family members. Don't be looking through their drives unless they've said it's okay. And examinations, as you progress in this career, you really have to watch out for making sure that the scope of this investigation is on target and something appropriate, because what could happen is if you did that thing with Mary where you did the whole investigation and you didn't have all your paperwork and all your document, all that presentation, what could occur is later Mary could say, you know what, I was targeted. They were trying to find a reason to fire me, and they just looked around for bad things. And in court, that could be how it looks. So you want to have that whole process really firmed up. And the last thing is once you get through this and you're in this industry, help your colleagues. I've seen some of the most protected uh, PII, PHI, protected health information, credit card information, stuff that no one else should see, have to be brought in for a collection for forensics. And when we extract it, no matter how it's encrypted, we have it in clear text. And so if they leave those forensic artifacts just out or on a drive or something like that, and they get stolen and it's not encrypted, it could definitely be a bad day. So demo time. Uh, what we're going to do is I'm going to go over a little bit of the pre-prep work that we covered in the handout that you've gotten. If you've done all that, man, fantastic, you can follow along. If you haven't, don't worry about it now. It would take probably 20 plus minutes to do it. And, we don't even have that much time left for this part of this talk. I want you to just focus, but I've got everything documented, the pre-work, and then the post-work has like handouts and information. So you're going to be supported. I'm going to briefly show you how to add evidence, and we're going to have enough time to do the Rhino investigation, which may sound very weird. You might like, what is he talking about? It was in the pre-prep work, and I'll go into it lightly so it kind of brings us all on the same page. And then afterwards, I'm going to show just some information on how you go about doing something practical at home, like taking this forensic tool and going through all those old hard drives and floppy disks and CD-ROMs you've got, getting all the documents and pictures and moving them over to your brand new computer, and then actually destroying those old hard drives and stuff that are probably going to fail eventually. So with
Yeah,
that,
Sam,
yes.
just to interject, you're basically showing us one function of this tool, and this tool has, I think, over a dozen different things that you
Yes.
can move through and work through. But I really appreciate you giving us some specific, navigating through something really specific to get people more comfortable with it. But there's quite a lot of cool stuff that this it's really a robust open source tool.
Yes, and I appreciate you phrasing like that, because if you just walked away and were like, okay, that's all I could do, I would be doing the tool such a disservice. It is very robust. It's very powerful. And part of when we go through here and I just show you a couple of clicks, it's going to look like, wow, that was easy. The underpinning of that is got a pedigree and probably almost like 10 to 15 years of forensics to make it so simple now. But with the pre-prep work that we handed out, and it's okay totally if you've not done this. I just want to make sure you all have all this information, you've got all these links, you're not going to miss out on anything, but just follow along with me now. Supposedly, the scenario that you've been given is this rhino hunt scenario. And this is a little bit older one, but I like it because it's really a small amount of data to go through. The scenario or the scope is that the city of New Orleans has passed a law making it illegal to own 9 or more unique pictures of a rhino, right? And this is meant to be funny. Forensic people definitely we have a sense of humor. Um, it's the skills they're trying to teach. So a lot of times we'll see pictures of like this one rhinos because they're rare, or we'll see pictures of lolcats, and it's the skills and techniques that people are trying to develop and trying to find out, like in a real forensic investigation, how would you do it and what would you find? So in this scenario, 9 or more images is a serious crime. And in this case, someone saw something and said something to someone else. So the network administrator at the University of New Orleans recently alerted the police when his instance of, and I'm reading right here, rhinovore, which is some made up name, flagged for illegal rhino traffic, meaning too many pictures were found. Evidence in the case included a USB, a computer, but the computer's hard drive was missing, and the person was actually able to get a hold of some communication that went across the network, right? So network artifacts. What I love about this specific scenario is the links are in the pre-work, and I also got them in the end of the slide for the resources. You're able to download the archive. It's going to have all these logs in it, and it's going to have a forensic copy of the information. Away gaming laptop. And what's going to happen is you're in that step by step. I think it's like 7 pages and like 29 steps. You're going to go through and install Autopsy from scratch, install Nisrol, the specific version of Nisrol for Autopsy, and implement this forensic copy onto the tool, and then run a whole bunch of processes on it. That alone takes about 20 minutes, but once you do it, it's kind of like you get used to it. There's a lot of tasks in here, but they're not achievable purely with the tool. There's some additional steps and additional tools that you'll need to get to solve it. But I did give some additional links in the end to watch either YouTube videos on how to do it, or certain documents that were directed to be able to achieve it. So take it on I guess on faith here that we've already created a case, named it the correct naming convention that we would use, so that when we have hundreds of cases we're managing, we can manage them effectively. That's in the pre-write-up. Um, and Rachel will be able to still have those links, but basically you'll have this document that'll go step by step by step on everything I did to get to this point. And it ran a whole bunch of processes on the back end, ensuring that the tool could find as much information about the forensic artifacts on this device. And what I want to leave you with, so that you're at least have a framework or a concept, is I've given all the documentation links, etc. Almost all forensic tools these days, I'm going to maximize this so we get a little bit better picture. All forensic tools, by and large, are now laid out like this. The original the sleuth kit before really Autopsy was laid out in a very different manner. If you learn this interface, this section is called the tree view, and basically the program takes the zeros and ones and formats them to a particular way for you to access it. And then it's going to go over to this results. And then when we go to the results and you'll start seeing me click on it, it's going to show you what you're currently on, whatever it is, whether it's a picture, video, an executable, etc. So if we were to go ahead and go back to that scenario, the logs we don't have, we're only looking at the USB. And on the USB, when we get a copy of it, if we were to go click on it, and you just seen the results view come up, there's on this forensic tool, all these $ files and folders, they would not be there. The only files on that USB that if we were to plug it in and look at it would be this Gumbo Text 1, Gumbo Text 2. And that I just want you to have that framework that, hey, it's basically an empty folder with these two things. It's got some write-up. Okay, great. When you go through and do your look through this, everything inside of forensic tool is designed to not be altered, so you can pretty much explore as much as you want and you won't hurt the data. We see an MD5 hash here, so this is a unique fingerprint to this file, and we see additional information. What's going to happen now, and I'm just going to kind of walk through these and kind of give you an overview of what they're doing, but some of these concepts will just be a little bit more than we can cover. If you think of a USB drive and those Gumbo files were here, all that other space that's currently not being used would be like unallocated space, right? You're starting to get slack space and some other stuff, but just unallocated space if you think about it. So basically, if you had Gumbo 3 here, .text, and if you imagine on that USB, we suddenly say, okay, delete Gumbo 3.text. All that's going to happen is it's on the master boot record, but on basically the list of all the files telling what name goes to what file, it's going to delete the name, but really Gumbo 3.text is still listed there. It's still in the unallocated space unless it's been overwritten. And this is just how hard drives work. So what ends up happening is our forensic tool says, okay, we've got unallocated space. Well, it starts looking for two categories of files. It starts saying, well, hey, there's either these orphan files that it doesn't really belong to anything. Maybe it's another operating system that's on there, or there are these carved files. And I give whole links on that because it's a huge conversation. But if you think about carved files, all it's going to mean is that when you and I go onto a computer and we go and say, hey, I want to look at a Microsoft Word product, a .doc or .docx, the computer knows, hey, I want to go and open doc or docx opens with Microsoft Word. Well, that's association to run with that file. But behind the scenes on that doc or docx, there are a particular sequence of zeros and ones that tell the program, hey, this is the start of this Word document. This is the end of this Word document. And if you can imagine, most applications, pictures, PDFs, music files, internally, they have zeros and ones that are demarking start and stop. What this tool does is goes through and says, okay, I know what a lot of these zeros and ones looks like. If I find one, I'm going to try and recreate that file. And so what the tool did, if you go through view, it's going to break down into two groups, either file by extension or by MIME type. On the extensions, these, if you click on by extension, it's going to show kind of what you expect. The JPEG, JPG, PNG, things that you would expect to see images, it's going to put them all into the image folder, video into the video folder, audio, etc. Which could be very helpful for you to be able to, rapidly triage this. Um, or if you were to go by MIME type, you could just click on images and it'll break it down by the specific different types, right? So that's all I want to cover on that aspect of really what's happening. But this is all being done by the forensic tool. But we really want to know, based on the scenario, quickly, hey, does this person have illicit pictures of rhinos? Well, we see all these X's. For right now, ignore this S because I was already in this investigation. But in terms of these X's, that just means that the file was deleted. All right, well, that could be something very innocent, or it could be, oh, got some pictures of rhinos. Okay, well, great, we got some pictures of rhinos. He's only got two. Maybe this person's, got no other ones, right? But if you look, when we were doing the images, for whatever reason, by extensions, we've got these JPEG, JPG, etc. But when we come down to the MIME types and we say, well, show me anything that's an image, we've also got some GIFs. So maybe that somebody went to a website, and what we see here is we've got two more pictures. So now we're up to like four. So what would lead me to as an investigator if I only had this amount of data? What I had during the pre-work is had this all go through the investigation, do a keyword search, to index every single possible keyword that the tool could find. The tool found whatever words it had associated. We're just going to go ahead and say, okay, hey, rhino is a keyword. Let's just see if we find something, right? Search. Does its thing. Then we find two documents. The two documents, if we were to go look at this as an examiner, the first thing we're seeing is rhino pictures illegal makes me sick. I hid the photos, he. And it goes on to really point to this person's aware that what they're doing is probably illegal, and that they specifically hid it. Plus, it starts talking about how they threw the hard drive into the Mississippi River. So that's already pointing to someone did something pretty bad. If we just had this information, my teams would really start ripping this apart. We would look for a thing called steganography, where they're hiding pictures within pictures, which when you go through the solution that this link has, that is what happened. And also those network communication paths have additional information in there that you're able to pull out. I think it's 11, so the very illegal pictures. The deleted files basically are just taking that same information up here, putting it into a convenient place. You can track it by size. You're able to find the results. Was there a keyword hit? Were there email messages? Were there accounts? The tool's automatically doing this for you. It starts going through the whole information and parsing this out. With the time we have, that's about as much as we can cover in this. But if we were to take this same file, and let's say that instead of it being illicit information, you were to hook up your own floppy disk or hard drive at home, you could just as well pull up all, you wouldn't really care about the deleted files, but you could go through all the images you wanted, highlight them, and then export them and save them into a file, which I'll cover that in the additional information to send home with y'all. So with that, that was like such a shotgun effect. I hope you held on. If not, it's recorded. And let me get back to my Prezzo. And then we'll round this out. And then Rachel, just whatever questions we have. Here's my contact information. We're going to open up to questions. If you'd like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's fine. That QR code, if you got a modern phone, you just take a picture of it. It'll automatically pop up my LinkedIn page and you can connect there. And with all that, exactly 1 hour. Rachel, will hand it back over to you.
Nice work, Sam. You did a great job. Big kudos to you. I want to say that Amy said this is awesome, all caps. And then we've got Jules said she's really interested in this, and then Jill shared that she's actually writing a final paper on using Autopsy and
Oh, awesome.
CK Imager. So very timely and awesome stuff. I didn't see many questions. Okay. Wait, no, I see one question here. So a follow-up question to the Rhino images. Is there a way to mark the Rhino images like we did?
Yes, there is, and since it's being asked, I'll go ahead and change back over to my my screen here, because that's actually what was causing some of the issues. I was in that case, and you know, even though this afternoon I created a brand new case, went through it, had it going pure, so nothing would do it. Sure enough, I was playing with it. I went ahead and marked it again. And I'm like, that's not what I meant to do. So, what they were talking about is, okay, let's say in an investigation, you're trying to go through as quickly as possible to triage, because unfortunately, as a forensic examiner, if you do this for pretty much any type of role, the reason they have you is they have so much work that you are jumping and running as fast as you can. So when we go through these, you're sometimes thinking, well, hey, there's these two Rhino images here. Um, I think they might be important, because we don't know yet if it's illegal or not. You can right click and what's called add a tag. There are pre-built tags that you can say, hey, it's uncategorized, it's child exploitation, illegal, child exploitation, non-illegal, because law enforcement uses this, uh, child exploitative, notable, exemplar, or a comparison. So maybe you're just wanting to look to see if there's something else in a prior matter, or it's just not pertinent. So that could be just as much trying to find out, hey, this image matters or it doesn't, or what this information is. On mine, because really it didn't fall into any of these, I went ahead and just put it as a notable item. And what that's going to do for you, it's way down here in tags. But as you go through, and you can see I was playing with it earlier, um, it's going to go ahead and automatically give you those tags. And so now instead of you having to go hunt them down throughout that whole hard drive when you're trying to either make your report or have a conversation with somebody, is there's all four. Well, unfortunately, there's the four images that I picked up from different places. I didn't grab that other one. Let's go back to the GIFs. So this right here, this will be perfect. I meant to do this. You're going to highlight both the GIFs that are not marked, add the tag, add them as notable, and you'll notice this automatically updated. And now you've got the 6 photos in different locations, but really all it comes down to 4 separate instances, and you just need to go find 5 more, and then you got to hand over to law enforcement. But that's a great question.
All right, perfect. We've got another one about, excuse me, do you have a chain of custody process or form? Do you speak to chain of custody?
Yes. So what I've done for this, and it's a great, and actually I'm going to add that to get the document at the end. I'll put that in there to get the chain of custody. There, many years ago, the Secret Service came up with kind of one of the early days of like how to do a forensic investigation, and in there they had a chain of custody, and pretty much all of us, at least whether it's local law enforcement to some of the very large forensic companies, they may tweak it a lot, specific words, but by and large, it's this very generic chain of custody document, that in my career when I've gone through it, there's a lot of stuff that maybe you don't use, so that if you're not a big, if you're not law enforcement, you're not going to necessarily have attorney and arresting officer, but that could still be on the form. But the process, I've actually gone through, I think, 2 or 3 organizations and gone through that process, but those documents actually own that to that organization, so I can't share those. But essentially, it's a step-by-step guide, kind of like I wrote how to install the software, saying what to fill out, how to fill it out, when you got it, and it is vital. You're taking photos. Um, my teams know to take the images, add them in, um, serial numbers, running state programs. But yeah, that is such a super key part of this. But I don't have a process to give it. I can definitely get the form.
Perfect. And then I think the other question we had was about they noticed you're doing this in a virtual environment. How often should you work within a VM, or are you normally on someone else's machine? You know, what's the pluses of a VM and how do you use them?
Oh, totally good. Totally a great question. Okay. In in I don't want to say in the real world, but in an enterprise where they're already spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these tools, what typically actually happens is, um, and I actually I did this. If you look at, on my desktop, it's got both my own um, autopsy copy, and then in the VM I put one. It's not required at all. What I just did is so that I knew it was an absolutely clean space. I did that there, so it only had the Rhino image. It only had all the things I needed for this demo. I normally probably would not necessarily do that, and the reason for that is uh, normally uh, you're not doing the examination of your own computer on your own computer. You're usually hooking up what's called a write blocker, which prevents a device from writing to it. It just reads the information, and so they'll take it and then use a tool like I think someone else mentioned FTK Imager, a DD, which is it's kind of an older school Linux tool. At a high level, all that does is make a byte for byte copy. So if there's a zero on an empty space, there's a zero over there. And it makes like this one the forensic copy of the USB. So even though we don't have the USB, we've got all the information. And
Thank you. Yeah, that's
I just
totally
want, yeah,
helpful.
I was gonna say because there's just so much we just don't even get to scratch this, but that's a great question.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, see VM come up in other areas with security talks. You know, so I think that's I'm glad somebody asked that similar question.
And and you know for a situation like autopsy is really good about not messing up a lot of file systems. I've used some other forensic tools that write all over your hard drive. Just for to keep it clean, you obviously can use a VM player or a VM to do this.
You don't necessarily have to have two computers or you
Yeah.
know a sandbox, that kind of thing.
No, not for this one. You're not playing with you're not running viruses and stuff.
So most everything looks like it's gratitude and thank you
Oh,
for your time today and the information that you've shared. For those that are on the phone, there was also the question about will this, you know, how do we get access to this recording and the resources that Sam's referred to? As long as the tech gods work with us, we are going to be sending this all out. We did a test run for recording yesterday, and I learned that it takes, I think, some time to render. So, you know, it's not going to come out tonight, but we'll probably get it sent out tomorrow. You know, have faith it's going to work.
And on my screen, I'm showing I've got everything from the sources, the additional references.
Yeah.
I mean, there's chock a block of information, and if for some reason if the tech gods are not with us, which every live demo is always terrifying for that reason, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can shoot it off that way. But I have full confidence that they will be happy with us, and Rachel will be able to pull a miracle.
Oh gosh, thank you for your faith. But we plan to send that all out to registered attendees first. So everyone on this call should get access to that first, and then we'll be posting it more publicly. But we've got some more thanks to Sam. Are there any other questions before we say adieu for the evening? Once, going twice. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you making time to come out and hear about careers in cybersecurity, opportunities with Apprenti, and getting involved with our organization. And do take our survey, get on our mailing list, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.